A fifth term, and he was re-elected at the party's 14th Congress in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg last night. There has been minimal changes to the top leadership as all the top 6 positions were not contested. But to unpack the SACP's Congress, we have in studio with me Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia.
All right, so not many changes to the electoral group of the SACP at this time. What do you read into this? Is everybody content with their positions in this party then, Prof? Is that even possible?
Well, Alicia, I think if you read it carefully, the SACP is trying to navigate a very difficult terrain, a terrain of uncertainty in the alliance, a terrain of growing popular discontent with the government. And the SACP decided that, look, what we're going to do, we'll make sure that there is a lot of continuity at the level of leadership within the party. We don't want any surprises. We want stability, unity in the Communist Party.
But what does this mean about the growth of the party and the members within the party then, Prof?
That is going to be seen.
Yeah.
That is going to be seen once the SACP decides to stand alone and pursue its own project. And this is what they've deferred to next year after the ANC National Elective Conference.
Let's talk about that, Prof. I mean, we heard Cyril Ramaphosa there yesterday totally begging the SACP to not even think about disbanding from the tripartite alliance. I mean, we've heard a resonated call by the party as a unit for President Jacob Zuma to step down once again today. So what are we reading into all of this as we go into those elections? Are we really going to see a split between the tripartite alliance?
Alicia, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. But I was not surprised, actually, by Ramaphosa's statement. Look, if he wins and becomes president of the ANC, I'm sure he will need a united alliance.
Absolutely.
So his message was very conciliatory. But with the SACP itself, the party needs to do a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection. I'll tell you why.
I was about to ask.
The SACP still has a lot of outstanding theoretical questions it has not settled. Remember, the SACP in 1929 shifted from it was called the Native Republic thesis.
Yes, yeah.
1962, they came up with the two-stage theory and colonialism of a special time. Now they are talking national democratic revolution. If you look at them theoretically, you find that the party's theoretical intellectual positions are quite inchoate. That is the first challenge. Secondly, there are institutional political challenges the SACP needs to deal with within itself.
Within itself.
But
then doesn't that spell bigger problems for them within the alliance, Prof, if they cannot clean house at their own?
We're hoping that the re-election of Nzimande will actually help the SACP retrieve its own mistakes. The party has made a lot of mistakes historically. The truncated national liberation South Africa finds itself in, the SACP contributed to it. So we're hoping that with the re-election of Mr. Nzimande and the conference to resolve the question whether the SACP should go it alone in January, in 2018, we're hoping that such meetings, such forums will actually help the SACP retrieve the mistakes it has made.
And how do they go about doing that? I mean, they're at the elective Congress, and what should happen next, Professor? And do they have enough time to rectify those mistakes before we talk about whether they're going to stay in that alliance or they're going to go at it alone?
They don't have time. They don't have time.
Yeah.
They have to look into their documents very carefully. If they can even get external expertise.
But Prof, this whole discontent within the party amongst itself, how does it then affect the SACP being part of the tripartite alliance? And is this something that the ANC perhaps should have looked into to say, wait a minute, there's issues with the tripartite alliance and let's start at addressing those organizational issues first before we talk together as a unit?
Look, the tripartite alliance has never had time to reflect.
No.
Remember, they got into negotiations 1990 to 1994. without any pause to say, let's reflect, they moved into government. And in government, there's been service delivery protests, popular dissatisfaction, changing policy, moving from one policy to the other, especially economic policy. So when you talk about the alliance, you're talking about a crisis alliance, which has been running South Africa up to this point. Whether the SACP, when it decides to stand alone, will actually provide South Africans with a feasible alternative and hope, that we still have to wait and see.
I mean, look, Professor, the SACP maintains that it's Zuma's continued stay in power that is the mother of all problems within the alliance. But I mean, you've just outlined some very serious issues within the SACP itself that it needs to redress. But how do we then go forward when we're at a stalemate within the alliance? Are we really going to see that SACP breaking away? I'm just picking your brain on this one.
Look, I don't think they want this to be perceived as breaking away. Yes, they want to stand alone in the elections, pursue their own programs. In other words, maybe they want to downscale the extent of involvement in the alliance. When I listen to Solima Paila, they still seem to be very committed to the alliance. But if they stand alone, they are likely really to downscale their involvement in the alliance and be an independent party. The issue about Jacob Zuma stepping down, yes, it is important. It could be a good starting point for South Africa. But Jacob Zuma himself, remember, was supported by the very SACP.
I was about to say.
The SACP was behind the Polokwane debacle, which is now created in fact, the mess that we see the country going through.
And Professor, I mean, why would the SACP dwell on the Zuma issue when we know that the ANC is having its electoral conference just now in December? I mean, shouldn't they be looking towards a future plan to try and sustain, if they're going to sustain the party or the alliance?
Well, they have to protect their image. They've started at the noise. In fact, they've participated. There's a lot of noise going on in South Africa. Noise about the economy, noise about this and this, and we hardly listen to each other. So I think the SACP just feels it has to be consistent with COSATU's voice in calling for Mr. Zuma to step down, something which is very unlikely to happen.
Your final comments, Prof, on what we can expect. I know, of course, the leaders have been announced and all those people that have received new positions. But going forward, do you think that the SACP is willing to get into any form of dialogue to try and iron out any issues between itself and the alliance, and also, as you've rightly pointed out, within itself?
Alicia, that's quite difficult, because really it goes back to the point whether can we see emerging hope with the SACP, or is the SACP a flat spare tire of the ANC? This is a difficult question. Yes,
it's a very difficult
because the SACP first has to iron out a lot of issues within itself, and secondly, in its relations with the trade union movement. It must stop being sectarian, being the SACP, a vanguard party of COSATU. You see, the labor movement is quite broad. It must be the home of all people of the working class, irrespective of ideological stripes.
Professor, you've just raised some new questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo talking to us about the current SACP's elective congress that is taking place in Boksburg, and some of the interesting positions there. As we all know, most of those positions, the top 6 leadership positions, were all retained. Well, that was your global news. Coming up after this in a short while,